Hi, sweet faces. Welcome to week 2 of your homework review. We are going to start by taking a look at our rounding for today. Now, the first thing that I want to point out here is that we are not rounding to the same digit in all of these. Some we're rounding to the tens place and some we're rounding to the hundreds place. We're using the knowledge that we gained last week about place value to help us make some really great decisions on what our numbers are closest to. Now you'll see up in the top corner, I gave you a little bit of a reminder of the rules that we need to follow. We need to make sure that we're underlining the place value that helps our brain make really great connections of exactly what we're looking at. We're going to circle the number to the right. That's the one that helps us make the decision. Are we going to round up? Is our number going to increase by 1, or are we going to roll back to the nearest 10 or 100? Remember that circled number is the one that decides. So let's take a look at the first one. It says that we are going to round to the nearest 10. We're going to underline the digit in the tens place. We're going to circle the number behind. That is the one that makes our decision. Remember, we're really looking to see, is this a 5, right? 5 is our magical number when it comes to rounding. And I see that in my circle, I have a 2. When I'm rounding to the nearest 10, I'm saying, am I closest to 40 or am I closest to 50? If I think about a big number line, I know that 42 is closest to 40. So since this is a 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0, we are going to roll it back. 42 rounded to the nearest 10 leaves us with 40. Let's take a look at our second one. This one we're rounding to the nearest 100. So we're going to underline the 6, that's the number in the hundreds place, and we are going to circle the 5 behind it. The 5 is going to be the one that makes our decision. We know that 5 is our magical number. So this is telling us that we are going to round up. That means that the number that is underlined is going to grow by 1. Our 6 becomes a 7. Remember, everything after the underline, no matter which way we round, always becomes a 0. So 655, we're asking ourselves, is this closer to 600 or 700? It is going to be closer to 700. Next one, we're still rounding to the nearest 100. So I'm going to underline the 1. It's in our hundreds place. I'm going to circle the 7 in the tens place. The 7 helps us make our decision. So we're asking ourselves, am I closer to 100 or 200? This one again, I'm going to round up. 176 is closer to 200. All right, next one. I tried to trick you. You know, I like to see if I can keep you on your toes. We're rounding to the nearest 10, but this is a 3-digit number. Be careful. Still follow our rules. What number is in the tens place? It's an 8. The 6 is our decision maker. We're asking ourselves, am I closer to 180 or 190? We have a 6 in the circle. It's greater than 5. We are closest to 190. We have 37 rounded to the nearest 10. The 3 is in the tens place. The 7 is our decision maker. We're asking ourselves, am I closer to 30 or 40? That 7 is greater than 5. So 37 rounded to the nearest 10 leaves us with 40. Then our last one for this homework sheet, remember we only need to do one homework a night. We don't need to do them all. We do want to give ourselves a brain break. If we're rounding 818 to the nearest 100, we underline this 8 in the hundreds place. We circle the 1 behind. That's our decision maker. We're asking ourselves, am I closer to 800 or 900? That 1 tells me to round down to 800. Everything after the underline always becomes a 0. At this point, I'm going to ask you to stop this video. This is the end of Homework 1's review. All right, sweet faces, let's take a look at our second homework for the week. We are still talking about rounding. We have our rules up in the corner. We have our catchy little song in the corner to help us make good decisions. So let's review our steps. Number one, we need to underline the place value. This helps our brain make great connections and really focus on the part of the number that's important. We're going to circle the number to the right. That's our decision maker. We have to decide to round up if our number is going to grow, or roll back if our number is going to get smaller. Remember that the circled number is the one that makes that decision. If you need help remembering the rules, find the place and look next door. 5 or higher, add one more. 4 or less, let it rest. So this one, we're rounding to the nearest 10 and 100. We always want to make sure we're reading directions carefully so we don't get tricked. This first one, we're rounding 33 to the nearest 10. I'm going to underline the 3. That's in the tens place. I'm going to circle the number next door. Remember, that's the one that's helping me make my decision. I need to ask myself, is that circled number a 5 or less? This is a 3. That means we are going to let it rest. The 3 stays the same, and everything after the underline becomes a 0. So when I ask myself, is 33 closer to 30 or 40? It's going to be closer to 30. Number 2, we're rounding to the nearest 100. So I'm going to underline the 3. The 3 is in the hundredths place. I'm going to circle the number next door. I have a 4. So is 349 closer to 300 or 400? That 4 tells me to let it rest. The 3 stays the same, and everything after the underline becomes a 0. All right, we are rounding this one to the nearest 100, so I'm going to underline the 2 in the hundredths place. Circle the number behind. That is my decision maker. That 1 tells me to let it rest. So when I ask myself, is 217 closer to 200 or 300? It is closer to 200. I let rest, keep my 2 the same. Everything behind becomes a 0. Last one, 29, rounded to the nearest 10. I underline the number in the tens place to help my brain make really good connections. I circle the number behind because that is my decision maker. 29 rounded to the nearest 10. Am I closer to 29 or 30? My answer is 30. I am going to round this up to 30. That is the end of our review for homework number 2. Remember, we only need to do one homework a night. So go ahead and stop your video here. We are going to pick up our next homework next time. All right, sweet faces, welcome back to your rounding homework. At this point, you are rounding experts. You know your rules. You know your rhyme. Remember, find the place and look next door. 5 or higher, add one more. 4 or less, let it rest. I'm going to go in and highlight what I need to round to so that my brain makes really strong connections. And now I'm ready to round. I'm rounding 44 to the nearest 10. So I'm going to underline the tens place and circle the number behind. Is 44 closest to 40 or 50? It's going to round down to 40. We're looking at 877. We're rounding it to the nearest 100. I'm going to underline the 8 in the hundredths place and circle the number next door. I'm asking myself, is 877 closer to 800 or 900? That 7 tells me to round up to 900. Number 3, we are rounding 142 to the nearest 100. I'm going to underline the 1 in the 100 and circle the number behind. That's my decision maker. Is 142 closer to 100 or 200? That 4 tells me to let it rest and round down to 100. All right, we have a tricky here. I asked you to round to the nearest 10, but I gave you a 3-digit number. I'm still going to underline the number in the tens place and circle the one before. That is my decision maker. All right, that 6 tells me that I am going to round up. So when I ask myself, is 186 closer to 180 or 190? I'm going to round up to 190. Two more, my friends. We are rounding 88 to the nearest 10. I circled the 8 in the tens place, and we also have an 8 as our decision maker. Is 88 closer to 80 or 90? It's going to round up to 90. And our last one, we're rounding to the nearest 100. We have 239. I'm going to underline my 200s. Circle my 3 tens. I'm asking myself, is 239 closer to 200 or 300? That 3 tells me to roll back, let it rest. I am closer to, oh my goodness, my brain. I'm closer to 200, my loves. I'm going to round back to 200. With that, we are at the end of this homework assignment. So go ahead and stop your video. You don't need to go any further. This is the end of the homework for today. All right, sweet faces, we have one more homework practice for this week. Remember, you do not have to do them all, but just in case you wanted the extra practice, I did want to review this one with you. So when we're rounding to the nearest 10 and 100, we know the rules. We are professional rounders at the end of this week, but just a quick review. We need to find the place and look next door. 5 or higher, add one more. 4 or less, let it rest. First one, 36, rounded to the nearest 10. I'm going to underline the 3 in the tens place and circle the 6. That makes my decision. Am I closer to 30 or 40? This rounds up to 40. When I round 662 to the nearest 100, I underline the 600s and circle the 6 tens. It's going to help me make my decision. Am I closer to 600 or 700? I'm closer to 700. When I'm rounding 494 to the nearest 100, I'm going to underline the 4 in the hundreds place and circle the 9 in the tens place. Does that 9 tell me to round up, closer to 500, or roll back? You're right, love bugs. 494 is closest to 500. And our last question for this week's homework, 59 rounded to the nearest 10. I'm going to underline the 5 tens and circle the 9 ones. I'm asking myself, is 59 closer to 50 or 60? It is closer to 60. And that brings us to the end of our homework review for this week. If you have any questions, sweet faces, always bring them to class. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you next week. Goodbye, my loves.